All right, this video is going to be a quick rundown on just some basic Studio One navigation and usage, basically. So we're going to talk about how we bring in the plugins, the effects chains for the different vocalists, and how we adjust the dynamics of different sources, that being like compression and dynamic EQ and the actual gain volume of specific channels. And then in another video, I'm going to try to talk a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish, philosophy, things like that. So as you've seen in the other videos, when you open the template, you're going to get this window. It won't have these recorded tracks in it. This is from a Sunday. But you'll get this window on one screen, and then over on the left monitor, you'll get your actual mix window with all of your channels and faders. And you can see here, these are our plugin chains. So there's multiple plugins on each of these inputs. So when the template opens, you will get plug-in chains on pretty much everything except for the vocals, because those are going to be very specific to each singer. The guitar settings that we're using seem to be working really well for each guitarist. We just have to adjust how much gain there is coming in so that the compression and stuff works like we want it, and I'll unpack that a little bit more here later in this video. So just like a soundboard, we've got volume faders here, and we've got these pan sliders, I guess you could say, to pan things left and right. Those correspond with the controllers on the desktop, so you don't have to use your mouse to adjust things. You won't be able to see me move some stuff because I don't have a camera to show you the control surfaces, so I'll use my mouse when I'm doing things, but you'll be able to do that on the fader controllers on the desk. So when you open up a session and you're getting ready for a Thursday practice, one of the first things you can do is name your vocalist channels. I name my electric guitars as well. So like you can see here, Mike's electric, Jacob's electric. I renamed these back to what they are when the template opens to show you how we do that. So you just double click on that, and I know that this is Mike, was in vocal 1. You can hit tab and it'll tab you over to the next one, and this was Katie. And I'll hit tab again, and this was Dave. Oops. Okay. So now we're named, and now we know who's who. You should be able to figure that out either from listening quick as they're getting ready to go, or just popping out in the room and asking. So now we can bring in the plug-in chains for each of these vocalists. There are two ways to do this. One way I think is a little more clunky just because we're using two monitors, and that is actually to drag and drop the plug-in chains from over here in this browse window. This opens up with this button here, and we have effects chains here at the top, and then we have a broadcast chains folder right here, and that's where all of our live broadcast stuff lives. So you can scroll down here and see Mike, and you can actually click and drag this over onto here and let it go, and that will put the plug-in chain on. So you see this window pops open, and if we pull our mix window back over here, you can see here's all of the stuff that's on his channel. So that's one way to do it. The other way is to do it in this window alone and not do any click and drag. So I'm going to remove these quick. So right here you see inserts. That's where the plug-in chain goes. Those are insert effects. You can hit this little drop-down arrow, and you see here are our FX chains folders, and you can see broadcast chains. So if I go hold my mouse over that, it pops open, and I can go pick Mic R and click that. I think this is a little bit of a better way to do it because you don't accidentally drag and drop it on the wrong channel and then not realize that you did it, and it can create a whole mess. So we'll do the same thing for Katie, broadcast chains, Katie Edwards. There we go. And same thing for Dave Hopkins. There we go. So, like I said, 2 ways. I think this is probably the safer way. If I accidentally drag something on this window and my finger slips off or something and I drop it on this delay effects bus or this guitar, like it'll get messy trying to figure out which things were supposed to be on there and which ones weren't. And that can just be a little bit clunky. So, all right. So now we have the plugins on the vocals. As I said, the rest of the channels in here should have what they need. So if we like scroll over here, like we got all the headset microphones, all the drum inputs. Like the drum inputs aren't going to change because our drums stay the same. We use the same heads and the same tunings. So a lot of this stuff will just work every week for what we're doing. Well, we'll come back. We'll come back to that. I was going to make a note, but so let's we'll continue talking here about how we then adjust the volume for these channels. So you'll see at the top of each one of these inputs, we have a gain knob here, and there's also a polarity flip button, which we don't use too much in here. So this allows us to change the volume or the input of the signal coming in, and it doesn't affect anything else anywhere else. It just is for this room. So once the front of house guy has set his gain, because what he does will affect you, then you can start to make adjustments. So just note that if the front of house sound guy in the room has to make a gain adjustment, that will affect things in here. So pay attention to levels changing and don't be afraid to ask, like, hey, did we adjust the gain, so that you can make adjustments accordingly. So the way that we are going to set our levels is based on how much compression we're looking for on an input. It is very important that we only use the gain to change the level of compression. And what I mean by that is if you're getting too much compression, turn the gain down. If you're not getting enough compression, turn the gain up. So right here, the CLA 76, this is our compressor on this vocal. There's more than one, but this is the one that we'll use to make our settings. We do not adjust the input or the output, the attack release, any of these settings in here. We leave this as it is set, because this gives us the result that we want when the input is at the volume that it should be. I'm not going to unpack the whys and what fors, but if you start messing with these, it changes how the compressor reacts, and it doesn't react the way that we want it to, in the way that sounds the most transparent for our vocalists. So I'm going to hit play on the track here. We're not going to hear anything. We're just going to see the meter moving. So you can see it's just randomly hitting it just a little bit on Mike's voice. There was like a decent amount there. So my guess is this is probably not quite enough compression. So let me unmute. Turn. All glory forever, amen. Okay, so we're not keeping him under control all the time. We're only catching those like little exaggerated consonants and things like that, and so it's not leveling him out enough. So I'm gonna rewind just a little bit and hit play again, and we're gonna turn the gain up here at the top and get this compressor to work all the time. Like I want it kind of catching him all the time, and it's okay if it really starts to grab him and getting it down into like this -7 to -10 dB of reduction. He's alive. So take this freedom, take this love. Can you feel it rising up? He is here. So right there, you could hear on that up, it kind of ducked him a little bit too much, like it sounded unnatural. So that was probably a little bit too much gain. So I'm going to back it off a few dB. He is him. He is alive. He lives. All honor and power are his. Okay, so that seems decent. We're listening to this out of context. I'm not really explaining some mixed philosophy stuff right now. So for now, we're just going to run with that as there we go. We've adjusted his gain. You typically want to make these adjustments when the vocalist is singing lead, because that's when they're going to sing with, I would say, the most gusto, and get your settings for that. If someone does not sing lead at all in the morning, then you just get their settings based on where they're at when they're singing backup vocals. So as we turn the gain up, obviously the volume is going to get louder. And if that volume is, if that volume is too much in comparison to the other things, and we feel like our volume fader here is like buried way down here or something, there is a plugin at the end of the chain that allows us to adjust that. And that is this Mix Tool plugin. So this is basically is a volume after all of these plugins do their work. So this allows me to set my fader volume where I want it. And ideally what I try to do is get it so that when the vocalist is singing lead, I hit them at 0, and then I kind of ride them from there as the song goes on. So that may mean in an intro, they're singing a little bit softer. I have to push them a little bit past the 0, turn them up a little bit. And then as they get a little bit bigger, I might have to pull them back. But that way it gives me kind of an average home to push everything up to as songs transition. And we don't have any of those random awkward, like, oh, we missed the first 3 words because I forgot to turn the vocalist up. So I'm going to unmute the rest of the band here. And we're going to adjust Mike to sit just roughly where we want him in the band with this gain. So I'm going to set this to 0. And we're going to hit play, and I'm going to adjust the gain and change the fader volume to get it so that it's decent. It's a decent volume at 0 dB on the fader with the rest of the band in. The guitar's maybe a little loud here. Jesus, He lives, all order and power are His, all glory forever. Okay, so turning him down a couple dB there. I'm listening to it quite a bit quieter in here, so there's a good chance he's still too loud. I'm going to put him back to where he was, which was like -6 or so. So you just have to adjust that so that your stuff's all sitting in a nice range. We don't want to see faders like way down, like this acoustic fader. I may have bumped this. Like this is turned down quite a bit, and so we may want to, just like the other stuff, we have a mix tool. We may want to turn, wow, I already turned him down a lot. We may want to turn it down further so that we can push this fader closer to 0. And that just kind of keeps everything in a nice, neat line as you're adjusting things, and you're not having to reach with your fingers for stuff. And also helps you make more finite adjustments. Okay, so quick review of what we just talked about. We're adjusting compression for the vocalist using this gain setting right here. Okay, and then if our volume is out of whack, it's too quiet, it's too loud, but we have the compression we want, we can either turn it up or turn it down to get our fader to live around the 0 dB mark. So that applies to anything that has a compressor on it. So yes, we have compressors even on our electric guitars. On these, though, we're not going crazy with compression. So if I hit play, I'll unmute the instruments here. So you see, we're only, Mike's playing pretty hard, and that may even be a little, may have bumped that up too much there. Rewind a little bit. We're only getting 1 to 3 dB of compression on the guitars, and that's really what we want to see. We want to see it like when they're playing big. We want to just be kissing it. If we go look at Jacob when he's playing his riff, I mean, it's barely touching him, which is okay because it's there to catch him when he starts playing big chords. So same thing, we can't adjust any of this stuff. We leave all of that alone, and we just adjust our gain settings across the top. All right, let's make a quick note here on things that we don't mess with. So really, we shouldn't have to mess with any of the stuff on the drums. We should probably be able to leave all of that stuff alone. Like I said, we use the same drums, same heads, same tunings. Any of these buses in here, it's important that we leave these volumes alone and where they are, and also that we don't change any of the settings in here. The reason that this is important is all of this stuff is set up so that if you're mixing at the right volume, we get the right end product and end compression and all of that stuff. So I'm going to do a different video on volume metering and some of that stuff. But if your signal is not hot enough and you're wanting to like adjust settings in here for compression or something to get more compression, that would be a problem. That means you're not mixing loud enough. So that's why we don't want to change the settings on any of this stuff. We want to change the volumes coming into those settings to make sure that we're meeting our volume standard that we're trying to hit for the internet. So another thing that we definitely don't mess with is this effects chain here. This bus is the broadcast feed. So this is what sends out to the internet, to the chapel. Right now it's going to the auditorium. So there's very specific processing that's happening on this to basically, quote unquote, master the sound before it goes out to the World Wide Web. So if we're not hitting this with enough signal, we will not get the compression and stuff that we're after to keep the signal at the levels that we want. So we do not adjust this fader volume. We don't adjust any of these bus sends or any of that stuff. Like, we got to leave this guy alone. On the monitors, that's what this fader over here is. This is where you can adjust the volume of the speakers in the room. And there's a few plugins on here that also, like, we don't mess with these. These plugins are here to make the studio monitors sound as flat, as linear as possible, so that the decisions that we make for EQ and stuff in here translate well to other platforms. So people's laptops, headphones, TVs, etc. This room just has a little bit of a sound to it, and so we're fixing that with some plugins here to do that stuff. So one note on volume changing on this, like, you really want to set this at a volume that's comfortable for you when you're hitting your volume threshold on the volume meter on the desktop. And you kind of want to know what that number is, and you want to live there during worship and not change it, because if you start changing it, you'll start to cheat the volume up or down depending on what you've done. So I know for me that I run this at -3 for the worship time and the musical worship time. And so when that is happening and I have that set, I know that I mix loud enough to get the volume level that we need for going to the web. When the teaching starts, sometimes when we're hitting the volume that we need for the teaching on the volume meter, it can kind of feel a little bit loud to me, because I'm listening to music is one thing. Listening to someone talk at that volume is another. So in those instances, I'll turn this fader down during the teaching and kick back and relax and listen. But when the music time starts again, I push this back up to -3. Sometimes I'll even just type it in to make sure that I'm at the level that I want to be at. And that helps you be really consistent set to set with our volumes to hit the same numbers every time. So that's kind of the quick overview on how some of this stuff is working, the things that you can and can't adjust, or should and shouldn't adjust. In some other videos, I'm going to talk about, like, kind of our mix philosophy and what we're trying to create. Talk about things like the ambient microphones and some of that other stuff. So hope this is helpful.